vacation willingly with a child, or a kidnapping or some kind of cajoling actually happened. Letters and reports should be filed immediately with the National Crime Information Center as well as the State Department Issues Desk, which will immediately alert their passport name check system. And if you know where your child is, you should immediately request a welfare and whereabouts visit from the local U.S. Embassy or consulate as well. I would suggest contacting relatives, friends of both inside the United States and abroad, enlisting local civic, church, synagogues, anybody that you can get your hands on. You'll need to prepare literature, posters, postal traces, Department of Health locators, Social Security traces, the whole world. And do these things even if you don't think they will succeed. You don't know what you will reveal. And again, a copy of my presentation is available for people here if you didn't get all of this. Some parents have sought judicial subpoenas and search warrants in order to secure credit card information, old phone bills, or other mechanisms by which you might locate a child abductor. Even the Easy Pass that we have in New York, the little gizmo that gets you through tolls without having to physically pay, is a gizmo that has a record of somebody traveling in and out of certain locations and sites. It is just as important to put photos out, mind you, of the abducted children as it is the abductor himself. I can't tell you how critical that is. The abductor can be recognized more readily than a child that will grow with time. Even if you feel that the parent has not left the United States, I would suggest consulting with a foreign attorney and hiring yourself an attorney in the United States who is both familiar with immigration controls and family law. Be mindful that individuals with dual nationality may be traced through their passport applications. I would hesitate to cancel requests of foreign passport authorities by abducting parents. You might find your former spouse and a child in a third country by virtue of a passport application being made at another site. Of course, you will need to explore also whether or not the country that you believe your child is in will ultimately support extradition to the United States. So if they're playing games with you in their court system, but the retention of a child might be considered a crime, and they have an extradition treaty in certain areas, that's something to pursue. The more information you have at your disposal, the more data you will control. The greater the odds are that you will be able to retrieve your children sooner. Due in great measure to Pat and our lobbying, immediate family members of those who aid and abet child abductors are now prohibited from securing admission to the United States. This is one step. We hope one day that they too will also be prosecuted. It is also so important for us to realize that not only should we prosecute people if you kidnap a child, but if you provide a safe haven or refuge to a child, you're just as criminal as the person who did it. And we don't want you coming in here for surgery, for vacations, for business. We don't want your money. We don't want your place here. Finally, if you are successful in recovering your children, you may nonetheless contemplate a full prosecution of the abducting parent. There are federal statutes which mandate a 3-year federal term of imprisonment for those who abduct children. Depending on the U.S. Attorney's Office in the particular district that you're in, we've seen that the government will commence these criminal prosecutions. There are new statutes which need to be enforced and encouraged. And I had the success a few months ago of helping retrieve 3 children who were kidnapped and taken to Syria through this kind of leverage. The father came back. The FBI arrested him, put him in jail. He was going to bring the children back. He didn't want to bring the children back. He was going to be released. This young lady, a doctor, an anesthesiologist, did not have a lawyer who understood more than family law and divorce. The husband was going to be released. His kids were still in Syria. I brought up the statute. I call it the Pat bill. I brought it to the chief of the U.S. Attorney's Office. Hold this guy in jail. We'll get the kids back. We held them in jail. We got all 3 kids back. Marched themselves into my office. This is an unbelievable victory. But let me give you a little sense of what happened. This is still the father of these 3 children. Now, try to explain when you have to a mother who's recovered her children the glory and the need to continue the prosecution for other people who aren't as victorious. Very hard, because this is still the father of the children. So, and the government's case is only as good as their main witness. And the main witness of the kidnapping is the wife, the mother of the children. Now that she's got her kids back, she's less inclined to help the cause, so to say. And the government right now has said to me that they will negotiate his removal from the United States in lieu of serving time in jail. And I'm still talking till I'm blue in the face. I want him prosecuted. I want him staying in jail to the last day of that 3 days, if only to send messages to all the other parents around the world that you will get prosecuted. But we have to also be careful, because if we send this message out, parents won't return. The FBI won't conduct sting operations, and it's a very delicate balance, and that's why each case is so delicate, so important, and that's why the law has to complement the few statutes that are out there. Because anybody knowing that they took their children, that they're going to serve 3 years mandatory federal sentencing in the United States, is not going to come back here. Often the process of trying to secure your children back involves tremendous energy, time. I would recommend leaving no stone unturned, going on record formally in writing to every official you've ever spoken to, and calling other parents who've paved the way with that particular country as well. Well, Hague Convention cases. Let's talk a few minutes about the Hague. There is obviously a big difference whether or not your child is abducted and taken to a country which has ratified the Hague or not. The Hague Convention sought to compel the return of a child to the child's habitual residence in order to facilitate a proper determination of custody based on the child's quote-unquote best interest. We've heard that to death with Elia and Gonzalez. It's not a Hague ratifying country, and it just, again, was one of those things that people confused people with. It's a procedural device only, the Hague. It's not a substantive custody determination. About 53 countries in the world have only signed it. The language of the exceptions to the Hague are very critical because it delegates significant discretion to a judge whether or not they actually want to return an abducted child. There's the grave risk of harm exception and the consent exception. A judge can refuse to return a child if he or she finds that the child objects to being returned or has attained a level of maturity at which it's appropriate to take account of the child's views. And God knows what happens in some of these Middle Eastern countries where the child all of a sudden has been brainwashed or married by age 9. The court has also a broad degree of discretion in determining whether or not there is a grave risk in returning an abducted child to its home country, and the Convention does not provide many thresholds, levels, or standards. For the past years, I've been primarily dealing with countries which have not ratified the Hague Convention. I felt it appropriate to focus on the immigration controls and tools that could be useful because so few nations subscribed to it. In essence, what they've done, because they haven't subscribed to it, they've created safe harbors which greatly limit the effectiveness of the Hague in the other countries. A parent can now abduct a child and take it to a non-member country with very little immigration control. To date, we've, in the United States, no departure system. What we do have depends totally on a person volunteering their admission card when they leave. Do you understand the millions of dollars that we've been putting into the Immigration Service and the amount of technology that's available now to foreign countries? But people who enter the United States are given a slip of paper, and it's incumbent upon them to hand it over to somebody else, and then we know that you effectively left? That's terrible. Yes, we're a free country and you have the right to travel in and out. We certainly don't treat permanent residents with the same dignity and constitutional protections that we treat citizens. Well, why don't we take the opportunity to track every single person leaving the United States? I would be willing to take a half hour of my time with my children in an airport to make sure that I have the custody and the right to go to this country with my children so as to save one child. One child. That's the beauty of this Gonzalez case, because for the first time the world community, and even though the media had its own agenda with this thing, was focusing on one child. You can't pass somebody now on international child abduction without wanting to hear the nuance of that one child, that one case. They've put a face on this subject now. That's